Hey guys and girls, I hope you're feeling good. Welcome back to our next devlog. As you can see, the game changed dramatically. This is not a small thing usually where you say, all right, let's kind of like pull out, the next devlog. Let's talk about some changes. No, it's like a big thing. And so there's a lot of stuff that happened in the meantime, and it's also the reason why I was so silent about these changes and where I was also, of course, cautious. As you can see, obviously, because there are lots of art style decisions, lots of team decisions. That team literally grew from maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 people to now 30 people roughly, and this is a lot. And so it's it's an exciting time. It's really interesting. So it's in this regard. So I would say, but let's talk about all of this stuff, step by step, and then hopefully it makes sense in the end. I would say before we talk about the visual changes and maybe the changes to the team, I would like to maybe talk first about last summer. So last summer was very interesting in this regard because many of you probably played the demo, and this actually was pretty cool. So we had like a really nice numbers. We had a few thousand wish lists on a single day. This is on Steam. You can actually wishlist some stuff. You can actually argue about whether wishlisting is really reflecting actual game interest, because I'm using wishlist myself, so I'm not even sure if I ever bought a game that I wishlisted, but it's kind of like an indicator that something is actually doing pretty okay. And we also received like thousands or like of comments and many hundreds actually ideas and for gameplay. And I've watched some YouTube videos from you guys, or from YouTubers. It was very interesting, and even though the game was of course pre-alpha, so it's still was early in development, I kind of got the idea that we have to change a few things. So this was definitely an exciting and also very, I have to say, time-consuming time, because I had to literally to do programming and then manage the team. So we were back then maybe 4 people, and do all the social media stuff, right? Because I am still doing the social media stuff on my own. So that didn't change so far. And at the same time, of course, doing like some crazy stuff. So it was really, for I think 1 or 2 weeks, was really a tough time, because at the same time, of course, I had to talk to the investors. And as I mentioned once, we received like lots of contacts and lots of proposals and from all kind of investors last year. I think it was like 30, 40 contacts, all kind of different sizes. Really, like investors on the one hand, on the other hand, publishers who also want to invest. I actually, in the end, and this could become like an own video, because it's very interesting, I think, particularly for other developers, is that in the end I decided to go with the team up with the biggest investor in the gaming industry, by the way, which is not a publisher. And this was very interesting. This was really not just because they're the biggest, but simply just because it really made click. Like we were really, and this, maybe I will do another video about this, where it really makes sense, and I felt like, all right, this is really probably one of the most interesting contacts so far, and it was pretty good. At the same time, having someone so big and so famous to team with us was pretty awesome. It was pretty interesting. And again, it led to a few changes, as you obviously can see. Of course, that the team changed, and of course, this also did not happen overnight. As you can imagine, such important things, take many months. So this is the reason why I couldn't talk about it, because sometimes when you make these deals, when you make some changes, you have to wait until it's actually really through, legally speaking, right? In terms of contracts and lawyers and stuff. And well, this was really complicated, and it really took us, I think, until December, until the end of the year, and then which was also the time we were then kind of still small, where we then were prototyping and trying out about how to change the game and visually, which I will talk about in a second. All right, let's maybe talk about the visual changes, I think, before we talk about some other things of the game. Well, the visual changes are obviously changing now to full 3D. This was really interesting. There was actually a story behind it. Maybe I would do another video about this. Basically, our current investor asked me at some point. They said, we talk about some stuff like multiplayer and how to do it, the server part and so on, and mobile. And I said, well, this is all fine. It's just a matter of time. But I said, well, something that I would like to change, because they kind of offered me, they said, what would you do if you had the opportunity, the creative and the financial opportunity? Well, what would you like to change in the game to improve the game significantly? And I said, well, I think we should really remove the pixel art. So you can imagine, as probably as some of you are also wondering, this was kind of like a really moment where, kind of like raised a number of question marks. And then I had to explain it to and what I meant, and I had to explain the technology of our game. Basically, what our game is and was back in last summer, it was already a 3D game, a full 3D game. What we just did was we were using 2D billboards and then certain kind of like camera tricks to give the appearance and kind of like so make the game feel like it is 2D, right? But of course, as soon as you were fighting sometimes, or as soon as you turned the camera, you instantly get the feeling, oh my god, this is really a 3D game. And this sounds great on paper, but in reality, if you have a voxel engine game and you go, let's say, in closed corridors, or you're inside a building or whatever, if you turn the camera, or if you part of your character is then inside the wall, because it's pixel art, it's just pixels. It's really hard to get this right. It can become very expensive. And in our case, where we have hundreds of items, animation becomes a problem. And of course, we were trying and playing around with lots of different animation techniques in this regard, how to do this. In particular, because also we have so many hero characters, right? So it's not just, we have just one character, like in Hyperlife Drifter, where then animation becomes so much easier. No, we have like 16 characters like initially. And I thought, man, this is really extensive. And I looked into different solutions, and we had like literally, we found like 2 full different solutions on how to animate this. If you're interested, I could potentially do another video about this, specifically how we tried to solve it in the past. But I actually then said, well, if I had the money or if I had the time, I would really prefer to get rid of it entirely and kind of like take it, the pixel art part, basically kind of like a prototype, early stage of the game, production state. And I said, yeah, it's a very sacrifice and it's a really important decision, a very risky one. That is then on me if we are wrong. But I basically took the time, the months that we were not negotiating with the investor. I basically said, all right, let's take this time and consider, and do some prototyping, test it a bit, check how it would look, how complicated it actually is. And it turned out to be actually quite easy. Of course, creating those assets and doing the concept work is more time consuming, obviously, and the animation part. But I was really happy. I was really cautious about this, by the way. It literally took me like 3 months or so to admit that we should follow down this path, like for real. And we tried out different styles, by the way. But in the end, yeah, it actually works pretty well and so much easier. So certain parts of the game are so much easier. As mentioned earlier, obviously we need more people now, because of animation. And concept art, and then comes a 3D modeler or like a 3D artist, and then comes afterwards the animator, and then you have the programming part. So yeah, certainly, but it's still, man, I mean, you have to imagine that we literally spent like 1 or 2 years on always as a sideline, just to focus on the combat feel of the game. And I still was very unhappy with this, because we could not just animate all of the items in the game, with 2D animation. This was awful, and it didn't look good. And I saw some videos, and I saw some comments actually where people complained about this. They said, as soon as you took a gun into your hand and you rotated it, this was a bit awkward, in particular when the character was bigger. This is something that I learned, that what works in Hyperlife Drifter, or what works sometimes in certain games, you can do this within the game frame, kind of like within the art style. But if you're mixing 3D and 2D, people look at your game slightly different. They simply don't accept certain things as to being obvious. So yeah, it's like it was. So, but again, like the results are pretty awesome now. So because of course it opens up now so many possibilities, right? In terms of animation, area effects, visual effects. So there are so many things, and apparently. The change, or kind of like removing pixel art also from the UI, which was of course, as you can imagine, an open question, turned out to be also awesome. This is actually kind of something that proved to be by accident to be very interesting. Something that's literally a bit more complicated is, which maybe I can talk in a second, is of course creature designs and how to turn something that was entirely pixel art before now into something that is 3D. Yeah. Maybe we should also talk a bit briefly about some of the challenges actually this visual change caused, and also because it's cool to show. So this was really a time-consuming process actually. So some of the stuff was easier to transform from pixel art to non-pixel art, and again, this is the reason why I was so cautious about for quite some time. And this is the reason also why I didn't share anything with the public, because I really wanted to show you stuff that we are really committed to. But as you can see, some of the creature designs were really cool, some of the stuff, but it really took us some time to kind of like find our own spot and how to do the creatures, how to do the NPCs, for instance. And apparently the creature designs proved to be the most difficult ones so far. Of all the concept changes and all of the art changes, by the way. So this was very interesting. Some other things, were actually less complicated. Like, we wanted to improve the voxel engine, or like recode the voxel engine to also like maybe create a completely new one and this kind of stuff. So this is all ongoing. This maybe will take us some time. But really, the idea is that I wanted to create something that really feels good. Even without pixel art, maybe we will have a few pixel art icons in the game, but generally I really wanted to kind of like distinct ourselves from some other games, and at the same time, of course, create something that could potentially be able to, would actually exist maybe within for a few years. So this is why, I really like this idea to have something that's really holistic, kind of like feels that it's an actual believable world that you are in, and you can, travel across the world. There are different cities. I will not share with you like all of the changes that we made, because this is something for the future, because some of the stuff is still in progress. By the way, there are some big changes, which I maybe then can talk in a second. So let's talk maybe about a few gameplay changes. I cannot share everything with you, obviously, because I want to keep it a bit, for other videos, other devlogs in the future. I also want to, polish it and show when it's actually really done. But we are really kind of moving away a bit from just this really hardcore survival genre, because there were simply just too many survival games out there. It's not cool. Like it's a bit too much. And I feel like, man, we really have to go. So I really like this sandbox idea, but I really want to create like an interesting sandbox, by the way. But what I can definitely tell you that the gameplay changes also track back a bit to your proposals, like lots of ideas. And when I kind of figured that it's a few ideas simply didn't work out as well, even though we can actually say, all right, certain parts like the questing was pre-alpha and not really working. Other parts were really broken, or other parts were simply not cool. Like in terms of gameplay, the game loop was not so interesting. I will share more about this in the future, so do not worry. But what we can definitely tell is that we are definitely improving in this regard. So, like the building stuff and the farming and the animals and this kind of stuff, and the general game loop with the dungeons and the dungeon crawl. Something that I was considering, because this is something that actually someone said to me, who's kind of like a CEO of a bigger game company, that you probably all played, you definitely played their games before. He actually said, when I talked about him about our game, he said something like, oh, this is kind of like a No Man's Sky, just top down. And I was like, yeah. So at first I was very attracted to this idea, but then I realized, man, No Man's Sky is not a good game, in my opinion. And I don't like this idea to kind of like jump between planets. So this is, because on paper this sounds fantastic, right? But in Starbound and in No Man's Sky, I never liked this, how it's solved. It's just boring. And so what we do is we focus actually more on the planet, because we have a few very interesting mechanics in the game already, right? Even last summer. And so which means the planet itself, I believe, should be the more interesting part. It should really be more engaging, with factions and cities and villages and stuff and ruins and camps and whatever. So there's definitely a way to improve the game in this regard, in my opinion. Other than, So in short, long story short, there are some changes coming. We are currently working on some really bigger changes regarding the game. But I think that the game in general also benefits from it and really improves in this regard. Yeah. It's kind of like the benefit of having more time, by now. So what about the release then? So this was very pity. As you can imagine, for as long I was still talking to investors and lawyers and stuff. I wasn't really sure like what to announce and what to say, and I couldn't sometimes even answer questions. I'm really sorry about this. I did answer all like usually this stuff as you probably like are following on Discord, but obviously, as you can see, the release will more happen more likely either by the end of this year or somewhere beginning of the next year. And the reason is simply, well, guess what, we are really changing some stuff. And I think if you think about how Devolver Digital sometimes change certain games from pixel art to non-pixel art, yeah, this is definitely a process. This really requires more time, and we simply take the time to also improve the game and make it simply just shinier and better. Yeah. So what could I say towards the end? I'm very proud of the team. I'm very, I like our investor. I really appreciate the whole communication with our investors. Really good, by the way. There were, of course, obviously some obstacle because it's a big company and legal stuff. Lawyers are really expensive. Holy shit! This is, of course, a completely different topic. But I really like what we do, and I really like this change by now. I was really worried about the change, about the visual change, for a couple of months. This is, why I didn't share anything. But by now, I'm very confident that this is a really cool change, and it can actually lead over time to something really awesome, something interesting. I'm very happy about the current changes that we are making. And yeah, I mean, the whole team, I handpicked the whole team. And so I'm very happy with the situation. And it's also very interesting, the experience that I had in last year, because a few of the contacts that I had, the publisher contacts, they were, in particular the smaller ones, they were a bit awkward. And this is something that I potentially could do, maybe talk about in another video as an advice to other developers. There's in particular like one tiny publisher, I'm not sure if they are still around, which was a bit awkward. And it was like and I was thinking sometimes, man, if this guy is actually really talking to some 20-year-old indie dev, Jesus Christ, you probably will then ruin the life of this indie dev, right? And so there are a few things maybe that I can potentially give maybe advice. Because the story itself, I think our own project story and company story is pretty cool by now. I think it's, let's see about the release, but we started initially a long time ago with just the two of us, Jeffrey and I. Then it became 4 or 5 people full-time last summer or so. And then by now we are almost 30 people. Of course, the company is changing. So, I'm still doing the social media stuff on my own, and all this stuff recording, like right now, doing the YouTube videos, like all on my own. But it's of course changing, so we will hopefully improve this over time. Just give us some time, because there are definitely, as I can tell you, that growing a company like that quickly, there are always some obstacles that you have to overcome. But so far, we are doing pretty nicely, and I'm very confident that this will actually lead to a very interesting project, because my goal is really to create like an interesting game, an interesting sandbox game, by the way, which hopefully is interesting also even after a few years. So I really don't like games that kind of like disappear after release. I really want this game to be kind of like a long-term project, like a long-term game, because this is how I play sometimes games, right? And so, yeah, so much from my side. I would say let's talk about some other stuff maybe either on Discord. On the comments, you can also leave some comments below. I always read and try those comments and then try to answer those quickly. And then, yeah, I will hopefully share more stuff with you about the project and like following and other devlog videos. See you. Bye-bye.